Okay. Good afternoon. Today is 22 February, the year 2016. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in our country's military conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum along with a fellow volunteer, Bonnie Munch. And today we have the honor and the privilege of hearing the story of Commander Ronald Dodge. Commander Dodge was an F-8 Crusader pilot in Vietnam, shot down in 1967, captured, and died in prison. His widow, Jan Dodge Otis, will tell his story. So Jan, really good to have you here, dear.
Thank you.
Okay, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Okay. Jan, first of all, would you please state and spell Ron's full name?
Ronald Wayne Dodge, R-O-N-A-L-D, W-A-Y-N-E, D-O-D-G-E.
And when was he born?
He was born on June 17, 1936.
And he passed away in 1967.
1967.
So he was, how old was he when he passed away?
He was almost 31, not quite.
And he would have been, not today, he would have been, how old would he have been if he had a...
Well, he would be almost 80, he'd be 79.
Yeah. And where was he born?
He was born in Olympia, Washington.
Okay. And what was his father's name?
Donald Wayne Dodge.
Okay. And what did he do?
Oh, he had been a chief in the Navy during the Second World War, and then he had cleaners in Lacey, Washington, owned a cleaners.
And how did the family end up in Washington? Do you know where their ancestors all came from?
His mother was born in Canada. He had a lovely sister, Judith Dodge.
Yeah, and I
Davidson.
met her.
Yes.
Yeah, and she brought a bracelet into us, I believe.
Yes.
And when you guys came in. Was their family very religious? Did they go to church a lot when they were growing up? Okay. And so did he live in the same house pretty much all the time when he grew up?
He lived on North Street in Olympia while he was in high school, and then I can continue if you like.
Go ahead.
Yes. And then he was on a 4-year baseball scholarship to the University of Oregon. So he went to college at Eugene and played baseball there, and played for a Tacoma team called the Cheney Studs in the summer, which went on to win national championships, and then was even one of 3 young men for the United States who went to win a baseball title in South Africa. It was the equivalent to the American Olympic team. Wow. They didn't have baseball then. And
so that would have been about...
That was 1950. Well, he was a sophomore, between sophomore in college. So it would have been about 1956.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what college did he go to?
That was the University of Oregon.
Oh, Oregon. I meant high school. What high school?
Olympia High School. Graduated in 1954 from Olympia High School. And lived in the same house all that time. Yes. Sorry, that was your question.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Did he play any sports besides baseball?
Played football. He was a real athlete. I mean, he played basketball. He golfed. He did everything well. Yeah.
And did he talk? When did you first meet, you guys?
A blind date, 1955. I was at the University of Washington, and my friend was at Oregon and invited me down for the weekend. And she talked him in to taking her friend out. So that's how we met.
What kind of car did he have when you met him?
He didn't have a car when I met him, but his first car that I was aware of when he got that in college was a 1950 Chevrolet.
What color was that?
Light green, like so many of them were.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
2-door or 4-door, remember?
I think it was a 2-door.
Okay. Was he in ROTC?
No. He graduated a little bit behind me in college because he had gone that semester to South Africa. So,
Did I read somewhere where some of the big league teams major league teams were going to sign him? Or?
they wanted to sign him. Well, the Rainiers, which was AAA, wanted to sign him right out of high school, and there were some other scouts, but he elected to go to college instead. And then after he was graduated from college and he was waiting to go into officer candidate school, he worked for the Olympia Brewery for a while, just waiting to be accepted into officer candidate school. And being a little restless, drove up to Seattle and signed then with the Seattle Rainiers. And his coach there, the manager, was Freddie Hutchinson,
Yeah.
who went on to the
They call him the Bear. He was a Cincinnati Reds.
He went on to the Cincinnati Reds. Thank you. And he wanted Ron to go with him to the Cincinnati Reds, but Ron was obligated to go to officer candidate school. So it was, a little bit of a disappointment.
I'm from southern Indiana, and I follow the St. Louis Cardinals, and Freddie Hutchinson pitched for the Cardinals when he was pitching, and then later became a manager.
He was a well-loved manager, and he got cancer and died very young, and there's a cancer center named after him in Seattle,
Oh, okay.
the Hutchinson Cancer Center.
Was he in a fraternity in college?
He was a beta.
A beta.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're aware of Ken Kesey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I know that.
Yeah, but
story.
they were fraternity brothers,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's really the reason I met Ron, because Ken Kesey was dating my friend.
Oh.
And then, sorry, you're going to have to edit this part out.
That's all right.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was going to say about, they were in the same fraternity.
Okay. Oh, I see. And what was your major?
Spanish.
And were you in a sorority?
I was a Gamma Phi Beta.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
Seattle. I grew up in Seattle.
Okay. Where did you go to high school?
Bellevue High School. Yeah, my father was stationed down here in Los Angeles through much of the Second World War. He was in the Army Air Corps, but he had polio as a child, so he was not stationed overseas. So after the war, we went back up to Seattle, and he built a house on Mercer Island, and so I went to Bellevue High.
And what was your dad's name?
L. Bradford Ostrom. He didn't go by Linus.
No. And then he ended up doing what? Your dad.
My dad was a pediatrician, and he practiced for about 20 years in Seattle, and my parents decided they want to live in the sunshine, so they moved down here to Palm Springs, and he practiced for 30 years here in Palm Springs.
Right. And your mom, what was her name and her maiden name?
Dorothy Stern, Sdirn, Ostrom.
Where did for your dad, how did he end up in Washington? I mean,
He was born in Bremerton,
Okay. I mean, the ancestors, you know, where they came from much?
Sweden. They both came. His parents both came from Sweden.
What about your mom? What about her?
Her parents were born in one in Milwaukee and one in Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin. Yeah. So yeah, then they were German. Came from Germany.
Okay.
Beyond that.
Now, and what year did your dad come down here to the?
1961.
Okay.
Yes.
So you were.
They built a house in Las Palmas.
Okay.
When that was.
That was after you got out of college, then I guess, huh?
My first child was born by then. She was born in 1961. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, well, let's. So you met. Did you start dating pretty steadily then in college?
Yes.
Did you get married while you were in college?
Well, he still was, but I was graduated, but he still had a little bit more to go because so we were married in 1958.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you live when you first got married?
We lived in Olympia lived in Eugene because he was still finishing school, and then Olympia while he was at the brewery for a little. I worked for the state capitol. And then he went up to Seattle and signed with the Rainiers, so he was farmed out. So we lived where Yakima, which was C-ball, and then Missoula, which was B-ball. And then back to Seattle, he was recalled to the Rainiers for the end of the season and batted 1,000. Wow. Because the first time at bat, he hit a double, and then he was a catcher and flew a fellow out at second, so wow. He did pretty well then.
So he was a catcher mainly?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. But he's planning on going into it. Had he always been interested in aviation?
No, he was at OCS at a really interesting time. It was the start of, the beginning of thinking about war, and there was the Bay of Pigs going on, I think, about that time. And he had not thought about aviation. And they asked him where he wanted to be assigned, and he said Rota, Spain, because that would have been nice. But then at the end, they said, are you at all interested in aviation? For the questionnaire at OCS, and he wrote yes. And at that time, they needed pilots, so anybody who said yes on that questionnaire was pulled out to perhaps go to Pensacola to become a pilot.
And he did go to Pensacola
yes.
then? Did you go with him?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Did you live on base or down there?
No, we didn't live on base. We lived very close to the base, yes.
Okay. And did he talk about much? Did flying come easy to him?
He was an athlete. Yeah, very easily. Student of the month. Yeah,
oh,
he
yeah.
loved it. He really loved it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is what year did he go to Pensacola then?
Late 59, early 60, right in there.
Okay. And where did he go from Pensacola?
He went to Kingsville to learn how to fly jets. And from there, he went to Miramar and learned how to fly the F-8.
Is that when he started doing carrier landings and stuff?
No, they started doing carrier landings in Pensacola.
Yeah, Pensacola, okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And so now he's at Miramar. What year is this now?
61.
Okay. And you said you had your first child in 61?
Yes.
Okay, and you came back here, obviously, to have...
No, that was my second child.
Oh, your second
My
child?
first child was born in Pensacola.
Oh, it was? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
she'll be 55 in a couple days.
Oh, and what's her name?
Wendy. Wendy.
Okay, what does she do?
Well, right now she's a mom of a child who's at Cal State, University of California, Berkeley, and a boy who's a senior in high school who's a baseball player who's going to be at the University of Oregon playing baseball, just like his granddad did.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
And your
her husband is a physician. He's put on hold anesthesiologist.
Oh yeah. Okay. And and then your second child.
My second child is Brad Dodge, that named after my father, and he's. Yes, he was born here in 1963. And Ron was on his first cruise on the Oriskany.
Okay.
And he's now living in Basalt, Colorado, which is right near Aspen.
So the Oriskany, was that his first cruise?
Yes.
Okay. And where did you live while he was...
San Diego.
Okay. Where did you live in San Diego?
We lived in some apartments in San Diego, made a lot of friends, which I still have now. Yes.
If you had any advice for let's say a young woman that was maybe going to be marrying a serviceman and particularly Navy and be gone a lot and stuff like that, what might it be?
You have to deal with it. You have to be proud. Deal with the separation.
Yeah.
Raise your kids.
A good support system from the other wives and stuff?
Very much. Yes. Well, I didn't know the wives in the squadron where he was when he was shot down, because at the last minute, without telling me, he said he would go to that squadron. He was supposed to be at the replacement air group squadron at Miramar, 124, but the CO of the Squadron 51 that was leaving at that time knew Ron and asked him if he would come. And Ron would not have been comfortable had he not gone, because he had left the war from the 162, which was the squadron off the Oriskany, because his tour duty was up. But he went back in again, and he didn't want to spend his time at 124. He felt that he needed to go out and be in combat. So that would have been really bad for him had he not gone. And so.
Now, so his first tour with the Oriskany, he saw combat then?
No.
Oh, he did not?
He got as far as Hawaii.
Oh.
And the tour was finished.
Yeah.
And so he was out of the Navy for about a year.
Oh, really?
And then went back in again and went to 124 and then went to 51.
What was he doing the year he was out of the Navy?
He had various jobs.
Oh, okay. Not real happy with any of them?
No. Well, he was going to be hired by Oro Wheat Baking Company to be an executive, that type of thing. And his major in college was public relations, advertising and public relations.
He had no thoughts of professional baseball?
He was too old.
Okay. So he missed flying, I assume, also, you think?
I think, and he missed the camaraderie. And I think.
Yeah. So now he goes on the Hancock, what's it?
The Hancock.
Okay. So what year was that when he went aboard the Hancock?
That was 1967. He was on January 2nd, 1967 is when they left. Yes.
Was he one of the older guys in the squadron at that
He
time?
was just a lieutenant.
Yeah, okay. And so they went over to Vietnam or in that area. Do you know what waters they were in, or
No.
where they flying out? Okay. How many missions did he fly before?
I don't
his-
know.
Okay.
Well, all I know is that he got there in January, and then he was down in May, so I don't know the number of missions between then.
Did he write back to you about his missions or what he was doing or anything like that?
No, not much of what he was doing, except near the end I could tell that it was getting more dangerous just from the tone of his letters. And he wrote a lovely letter to his children and telling them all the stuff he was going to do with them, all the things he had planned to do with them when he returned, which is a really nice letter for them to have. Yes.
And so how old were they when he went down there?
My daughter was 5 and my son was 3.
And when did you were you first notified that he was missing? When?
It was May 17, 1967, because he was a day earlier over there.
Oh, yeah.
The time change.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
And did somebody call you?
No,
or what?
no,
Did they
I was
come?
outside showing my little 5-year-old across the street to play with her friend. And
This in San Diego?
in San Diego. By that time we had a house. We bought a house.
Where was your house?
In San Diego.
In proper San Diego
Yes.
proper? Yeah.
And the 2 black cars drove up. So I knew right away. And one was the chaplain and one was the CO's wife. And she came running out of the car with their arms out saying, "He's not dead. He's not dead. He's been captured." So
And
that's what happened.
when did you finally realize that he had died?
Several years later,
Yeah.
when he was declared dead in 1980, but there had been a lot in between, of course.
Right, and that was, had there been, okay, I know the bracelet program began around 1970, 71.
Right.
Did you know anything about him prior to that?
DOD sent me a photo that they wanted me to identify, and I said it looked like Ron. And so it turned out not to be Ron. I don't know how I'm going to talk to you about this. I want to make it very brief,
Yeah.
this part. And so, but what I need for you to know is that everybody thought he was alive all this time. And because of the photo, which showed this bandaged pilot, and because several of his pilots identified it as Ron as well, and there was no one else at the time. And when the real pilot in the picture returned, he said it was not he. So by process of elimination, they thought it was Ron Dodge. So he was perceived to perhaps be alive for a number of years. And
they had taken him to a prison camp, apparently, which was, you wanna, I think you.
yes, I can tell you about what happened the day he was captured. It had been, it was May 17, 1967, off the carrier Hancock, and it was his second sortie of the day, and they were, I think, strafing a bridge. And it was near the city of Vinh in North Vietnam, 12 miles from the coast, and his plane was hit by some sort of fire, and the wingman and other pilots in the area saw a chute, and when he arrived on the ground, he radioed his wingman, and all the other pilots heard it as well, that he was being surrounded, told him he was being surrounded, and he was breaking up his radio, because if the enemy gets a hold of one of those radios, they have people who speak very good English, and it could perhaps lead the other pilots to come on down to try to rescue him. And the pilots did not see him alive on the ground, but they saw a group of people on the ground, and they each gave a version of what they saw happen. Consequently, he was considered to be a prisoner of war. Do you want me to continue with this story?
Yeah.
Several years later, all right, the list came out of the live prisoners in, I believe it was 1972, and he was not on the list. Ross Perot became very interested in whether all the pilots were back or not, and because of a picture that had appeared that had been identified as Ron, even though it was not at the time, Ross Perot sent me over to Paris with Murphy Martin, who was one of the people who worked for him, to talk to the North Vietnamese to ask why Ron was not on the list when there was a supposed picture of him in Paris Match magazine. And I spoke with the North Vietnamese representative to the Paris peace talks, and he seemed very surprised to see that picture. I said, here he is in black and white. And he said, if he is not on the list, we don't have him. He seemed very truthful at the time, and I really had my doubts if Ron was still alive or not, but on the other hand, we wanted him to be alive. And I got involved with the National League of Families, and was on the board there, and Ann Griffiths, who was the executive director of the National League of Families, very bright lady who was very knowledgeable about things. got me involved in d- cut. Yeah, I need to start. Yeah, okay.
You're doing fine.
I have not talked about the picture in this way before because the last time I talked about the picture, we thought it was Ron. So that's where I'm trying to, I don't have my Pat story
Well,
going.
you're doing good. You're doing good. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's been so many years. You know, it's been so many years since I had a husband who did not want to hear about this at all. He was a Marine, colonel, and he didn't want to hear about Ron Dodge. So, you know, it's been a...
You doing okay? It's on.
No, I got the wrong one.
Yeah. It's
I don't want hot water there, Bonnie.
Yeah.
It's the one on the right.
Oh, yeah.
There
That's
you go.
better.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So, and I'm trying to circumvent this picture a little bit, but this story cannot be told because it's so involved in what happened, but the question that you asked, so you can just edit out what you want. Thank you, Bonnie.
Oh, you're so welcome.
It's nice having you over there, by the way.
Well, I'm almost tearing up listening to you.
Yeah.
So, let me think a minute and then I'll get back. I was at Ross Perot sending me over there in the Vietnam. Yes, and then, okay, so what I'm going to do when you turn this back on again is about when he was declared dead is what happened. That they had those, all the prisoners of war who had not come back and the missing, they had in 1979, I believe it was, and I'll repeat this, but I'm trying to just get it set in my mind. The word is hearings. Okay. All right. They had hearings when President Carter came in. Okay. I think I can do it. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
You want me to start? Okay. In 1972, the list came out, and he was not on the list. When President Carter was elected and came into office, the decision was made to have hearings about the pilots who were listed as missing and had not returned after the main group of prisoners of war were returned in 1972. And so they started...
1973, I think.
Three, thanks. Okay, I didn't know for sure what that was. The hearing started, and there was a hearing on Ron's case, and it was decided that he would be declared dead, as all of them were. 1973? Okay.
Well, that's after the guys came home, most of them in March of Operation Homecoming was like March of 73.
Okay. Well, anyway, he was declared dead right around that time.
Yeah.
And his remains did not return until 15 years later in 1980. He was declared dead in 1980. The hearing was in 79. Okay, that's what. 1979, from the time that the prisoners came back to the time that the hearing started, was from 73 to 79, and he was declared dead after the said 1979 hearing in 1980. Okay.
By the way, what I meant to say is the guys came home, most of them in March, but they may have known, before they came home, they probably
a lot of them were
they had a list of everybody, so they may have declared they knew who was missing, who wasn't, or prior to that.
That's right, because Ron was not on that list, and that's when I went over to Paris to talk to the
Right.
guy, and actually the list was pretty complete.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was trying to remember my times there. Yes, 79 was the hearing, and Ann Griffiths helped me with that. But it didn't work. They declared him dead anyway. So, so that had been 15 years from the time he was shot down till the time that he was declared dead in 1980. no, 15 years, and then his remains came back in 1981.
They did.
Yeah, the year later, and that was after a lot of publicity. Ron Miller, who had been an ABC News correspondent, got interested in the case. And so Ron Dodge was well known. It really wasn't Ron Dodge. His case became very well known because of that. And I think that's one of the reasons his remains came back, because I think the North Vietnamese got tired of hearing about Ron Dodge. And it was they used to return prisoners, they used to return remains 3 at a time. There would be 3 at a time, and then there'd be 3 at a time. And so in stop the camera. I'm trying to remember the date his remains came back. My old age is showing. It's in there somewhere. I don't know the date his remains came back.
And do you know where they found his remains?
I divorced from the shoot down. So he was taken to Bamboo Prison after the shoot down. I'm sorry, I'm messing this up for you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, don't worry about it.
Okay. Shot down on May 17, 1971. He was captured, and taken to a prison called the Bamboo Prison, and he was
I think it said it was in, I don't know how you pronounce it.
Ning On or something like that.
Province.
Yes, and he was said to have died 6 to 9 days after he was captured, and he was buried there. We didn't know that until a team was sent over to find out whatever happened to him. And they were told that by old men who had been at the prison at the time.
So when his remains came home, did you have a burial?
Yes, he's buried at Arlington National Cemetery.
Tell me about that.
I'm sad. You know, people came from all over that had known Ron. Baseball players came that had known him, that happened to live in the area. Old squadron members came who happened to live in the area. It was just, I don't like the word amazing, but I was so surprised to know how many people remembered him. And I had some people lived in the area who had been very good friends of us when he was in the 1st Squadron in 162. His name was, he was Buddy Flagg. I can't remember what his first name really was, but Buddy lived there with his wife, Buddy and Darlene Flagg. They had been wonderful, wonderful people. Buddy eventually became an admiral in the Navy, and he was on one of the flights that flew into the Pentagon. He and his wife were on that flight.
Oh.
My good friend Buddy and Darlene. They had been really good friends of ours in the 1st Squadron that Ron was in at Miramar.
And so your children were, about how old were they then at that time?
When Ron's remains came home?
Well, or when the burial was, yeah. Was that
his remains came home. They were flown into Washington, D.C. I happened to be back there at the time when I found out that it was Ron, because I was on the board of the National League of Families. I was in Ann's office, and they came and told me. So my children got on a plane and flew back there, and we had at Fort Myer. We had the funeral there at Fort Myer, and
they were close to 18, 20, something like that? About that
yes, my how old were they? My daughter, I believe, was, my son, I believe, was 18, and my daughter was something like 20. Yeah, right in that age.
In that
And there
age.
was lots of television coverage because they thought that he was the bandaged pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you, how many years did you work with the POW/MIA Families Network?
Well, Anne recruited me because of the picture, the phony picture. That was about, gosh, I would say 1980. I mean, I didn't, that was late. I believe it was about, you have to stop that because I got to think of the time. I didn't expect that. Give me a minute. I'm kind of losing it here. His remains came back in 80. When did I tell you?
Well, you had been working for a while with her, right? Prior
It was
to that?
only a few years because they
And
came to San Diego. Just give me a minute
Okay.
here, okay? I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Don't worry about it.
I'm gonna take a quick break and run downstairs.
Okay.
Let's see, he was declared dead in 80. I'm really losing it here, so just
I think it
give me-
was in 1980, I think, or
81?
Yeah.
My times are, he was down in 67. His remains came back 15 years later in 80.
Two.
Just give me a minute and let me get this again. I'm sorry, it all
That's all right.
went
That's
to
okay.
pieces on me. I haven't thought about this for so long. And when did I get on the board there? It's like everything is a total blank, so just give me a minute.
Okay.
You know some dates that you're not telling me that I told you that I don't remember? Could you prompt me a bit there?
Well, I don't know.
When did I-
I just wanted to general. I know that you were. Anne had recruited you because of Ron.
Because
It
of
was a
Ron's
big
picture.
deal.
Yeah, she kept
and
saying.
I guess the point I meant, all I wanted to know really was, okay, after his burial, and there had to be some sort of closure. Did you stay on with Anne for a while, or with?
No. No, you have to be elected to the board. I barely made it each time because the only reason I did was because of that picture.
Oh, okay.
But Anne wanted me on the board, and so I want to say 83 is a big date in my mind. I think that's when we buried Ron in 1983. Is that what I told you? I told you 83?
It was either 82 or 83. I can't remember for sure.
81?
Well, let's see. You said he went down in 67. You said 15 years
Yes.
later he came home, which would be 82. And so,
Yeah.
so
He
probably,
came back
probably
in-
82.
And I'm trying to, July 11th was when he came back. Okay, now I know that date. July 11th, 1982.
Yeah.
It was July 11th. That's when he came back and was buried in July of 1982.
Okay.
And then your question was what?
Did you stay? Did you continue on with the POW family after that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I
right.
didn't.
Okay.
I think might have been 83. I'm thinking 83.
Probably your time was up or whatever.
80.
In 83. Yeah.
I didn't. I got married to somebody else in 1983. I got married to my husband, who was the Marine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I guess I should ask you, did you consider that some sort of a closure as far as Ron whenever he came back?
Yes. And I had his remains analyzed by somebody who did that who lived in Colorado. I wanted to make sure that was Ron. This is, of course, let me get this all, it's got to all come back to me. I didn't realize you were going to go so in depth, okay, with all of this, so I have not reviewed all these things over the years. Yeah, I had that analyzed, and then he was buried, so there was, his remains, of course, went to the center in Hawaii, and then they sent them to Washington, where I happened to be at the time. And then they were buried. So so I had that. I had it. He didn't see Ron's remains, but he had all the stuff from Hawaii, the SIL laboratory in Hawaii. I sent it to me, and I sent it to this doctor who did that. So let me talk a little bit, and I'll get it back together again. Sorry, I just lost it. Surprised.
I'm just asking if you felt any type of closure once you realized that it was him for sure.
Yes.
And you got buried at Arlington.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember how long it took me to really believe that it was Ron. But as soon as I had that doctor look at, I really thought it was Ron when I buried him. But I think I had everything. Well, he got buried. Those remains got buried right after he came back, because my poor son was sitting there with that coffin, because he never even knew him. You know, he was 3 when he was shot down. He was sitting there with that coffin for so long. So I think that I had those remains, you know, the doctor look at those remains, the stuff from the remains after he was buried. It had to be that. I think I was married a year later after Ron's remains came back.
All right.
You know, that part is kind of a jumble to me.
Okay.
I don't
well,
know what happened.
I think we're pretty good, in pretty good shape here. I think you've told us all pretty much his whole story.
The part I'm worried that got out of sequence was after he was shot down, and from the time the remains came home.
I can don't worry about that.
Okay,
I can fix
that's
that
the part that I sort of got off track with. And I'm not used to telling that. I told the story before he came home a lot.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, like I said, you'll send us those other DVDs. I'll kind of,
Yes.
because I'll be cutting and pasting here a lot. And
Yeah,
stuff. So we'll
yeah.
put something really nice together. And
The beginning will be easier for you. The end, I know, I just fell apart. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Any final thoughts? Any parting thoughts before we close?
I gave you a couple good lines.
You did.
No, I appreciate you doing this, because I think it's really important that people know the stories of the families, and you're doing a great job here. You're so thorough.
Jan, I want to thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And if Ron were here, I certainly would thank him for his service to our country, and
Well,
thank you for sticking with all this for so long, and thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you, as I say.